Let's discuss Run Silly Game from Lab 5. Here's the solutions, and I'll run it and discuss how the game itself works. Each time you run it, you get a board, and it has cells that can contain blue player, some green food, some gray walls, and otherwise just empty spaces. You use the arrow keys to move around and find food. So up, down, up, down. If I try to go down, I cannot. Right, 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 cannot. I can't go off the board. If I try, I cannot. And if I eat food, yum, my score goes up. And then new food is randomly placed somewhere that's not a wall and also not the player. As it happens, you might never be able to get to the new food, as I cannot right here. So I said it's a silly game, and it is. But you can press R to reset, and each time you do, you get a new board with a random number of dimensions, randomly placed walls, randomly placed player, and randomly placed food. Okay? And you can play to your heart's content. I'll move down here and eat the food. There's new food. I'll go up here and eat the food. And I'll go over here and eat the food and eat the food. It's maybe a pretty simple version of a snake-like game. I don't know if it's going to hold your interest for hours on end. But there it is. And I'll reset. And this game is going to be hard to actually get a lot of points on. Okay, so that's the game. You have to display it exactly like here. Board has to be in the middle. Score equals the score in the top. Each time you eat, the score goes up. And the instructions down here at the bottom. Silly game, use the arrow keys to find food, press R to reset. Now let's actually look through some of the code. So here is the Lab 5 handout. And if I scroll down, make sure that your tkinter stuff goes below ignore rest, or else the autograder will be sad. And down here, what are we going to do? We have, to begin with, the run silly game function, which is just a modified run function to call run silly game, and do not modify it. Just leave it exactly as it is. You're going to want to modify the code above there. So at the first point, when you start the game, you have to go to init, and we've given you init. Init sets up the data. So in this case, we load up the number of rows and columns to be random between 5 and 10. And we store that in data.rows and data.col. So we have the dimensions of this board. Okay? We create the board itself as a 2D list using the make 2D list helper function. And it's of the given dimensions. We then have values we're going to use for empty, player, wall, and food. We do it this way so there's no magic numbers, because 2 is not magic when you assign it into a well-named variable. Okay? We'll use 0 for empty because we know that when we did make 2D list, it loaded it up with zeros, and we have it initially empty. We will then have a function called randomly place value. It'll take the data so that it has access to the board and the dimensions, and it'll take the value that we're randomly placing, in this case player. And this function will randomly place this value somewhere on the board stored in data.board. It'll actually return the location of that as well, which we'll store in data player row and data player call, so we know where the player is. Actually, it's sort of redundant because data.player is going to be somewhere on the board, and we're storing in data player row, data player call. That's maybe not the best design. It's the one we have. Notice randomly placed value has a pretty clear explanation of what it's doing, and then it just returns 0, 0 because this is one of the few functions you'll have to write yourself. But just follow the instructions here and you should be fine. Okay, so now to continue, we go ahead and place the food using that same randomly placed value. We will place the food in the board. We have a number of walls between 10 and 20, and then we place that many walls as well. And initially our score is 0. So init just sets up the board, the food, the player, and the score. Okay. Then the next thing that gets called actually is redraw all. Thank you. For redraw all, we'll draw the board, we'll draw the score, we'll draw the instructions. Nice helper functions for each. We've provided each of those for you. The score and the instructions are pretty straightforward. They are at the top and the bottom here. They actually include a magic number here at 20 and minus 20. You'll have to fix that in your code. No magic numbers, even if we provide some in our starter code. To continue, draw board. This is really going to do the heavy lifting. And to draw this board, we're going to just go through every row and every column in the board and call draw cell. So we'll call draw cell for this cell, then for this cell, then this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, and so on. When we draw a cell, let me hit R a few times. There we go. Because that one seemed to have a checker pattern, which is not actually. These are not checkerboards, right? Okay, so when I'm calling draw cell, say on most of these cells, they're just empty cells, and you want to draw the square or rectangle, actually, it's not necessarily a square, around that cell. If it's a wall, you want to draw that same thing with a gray fill. And then after you draw the white, if it's not a wall, you have to check and see if it's a player, in which case you draw a blue oval, or food, in which case you draw a green oval. Okay? So we call it draw cell repeatedly. And what does draw cell do? Well, it says on this canvas with this data at the given row and column, draw that cell. We have a margin of 40, which is this distance here on the top, left, bottom, and right. The row height, the height of each row, is the total height of our window all the way across minus two margins, the margin on top and the margin on bottom. And then you have to divide by the number of rows. If we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows, the height of this row is the distance from here down to here divided by 7, and that's what this does. The columns do the same thing for the widths of each column. Then we compute for the given row and the given column, we compute its left top, its left and its top, and then its right and its bottom. You should take a little time to verify that you believe that these formulas are correct. Once we have these values, the rest is left up to you. You're going to have to read this and think about it. And you're going to actually have to draw these rectangles, either filled white or filled gray. And then you have to draw the green or the blue ovals if they happen to, if that rectangle, if this cell happens to contain a player or it happens to contain food. Okay? So the next thing is to respond to events. The only events we care about are key events. And the only key events we care about are up, down, left, right, and R to reset. So let's go ahead and look at our key pressed, which we've written for you as well. If you reset, we'll just call init again, because init happily just resets everything, does just what we want. Otherwise, you're going to be moving up, down, left, or right. And we're going to have a function called doMove, which takes the data, the change in row and the change in column. So if I'm going up, I'm changing my row by -1, and I'm not changing my column at all. Hence, doMove data -1, 0. If I'm going down, I'm changing my row by +1. Now, if I go down from here, see I'm going down, nothing happens. I will still call doMove, but doMove will figure out you can't go down, it'll do nothing. Whereas if I go up, doMove will actually do the move. So finally we go to doMove, and here's doMove with a pretty complete set of instructions, and you're going to have to write this as well. So what you're going to do is you're going to take in the change in row and column, and you're going to compute, hey, can I move in that direction right now? So for instance, right now if I try to do move to the right, you'll say I cannot because there's a wall there, and then you'll do nothing. Same for the left. If I tried to do move from here down, you say I cannot because I'll go off the board. If none of those are true, and do move will stay on the board, go ahead and do it. Doing a move simply means resetting the board of the row call, because player 1 was stored here, and we have player 1 stored there. And also, if you recall, in the main init, we stored player row, player call in these data fields. You have to update that. The only other thing that's weird is if I do a move that eats food, yum, you have to update the score, and you have to place new food randomly. And really, that's it. That's everything. It's not the most fun game, but it really lays the foundation for other games we're going to play later, and not just games,